known Jim for a long time, since we were 12, back in the day. The one that started Wendy's franchise, one of the first franchise of Wendy's in the country. And that was an exciting time. But, let's go all the way back, if you don't mind, and talk to us a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey.
Well, it really started, I guess, in the food industry when I was 15 at a Kentucky Fried Chicken. At night, and I worked in a lumberyard during the day. And so I really liked the hospitality industry. I was kidding with this young lady over here, and I said, there are now 15 people that actually work their way through SMU in the history of the school, and I'm one of them. But I worked at Steak and Ale and had the pleasure of working with Norman Brinker, and I got to work with him when there were only 2 Steak and Ales, and then I was president of the business school at SMU, so I got to work with him in that capacity as well. So he was really an inspiration to me, along with a guy named Roy Weingartner, who had an 11th grade education, and he started a little plumbing business called the Dripping Faucet. And that little plumbing business turned into him doing some contracting work for Holiday Inns Inc., just on the plumbing side. And he thought, well, heck, if I can do the plumbing side, I can be the general contractor. And then he thought, well, if I can be the general contractor, I can own these darn things. So he ended up being the largest Holiday Inn franchisee. And he and his partner, John Q. Hammonds, ended up with 75 Holiday Inns. And then they sold that to the parent company. And then he ended up becoming the chairman of the board of Holiday Inns Inc. and kind of booted the founder. So those were kind of a couple of the people that I highly respected, got to work directly with in different capacities, that kind of inspired me to want to own my own businesses and that kind of thing.
That's awesome. And I know you were in business school, and how did you go from business to what you're doing now when it comes to real estate and, of course, hospitality?
Well, my degree was in finance, and my minor was real estate finance. And so there was kind of a natural transition, but I decided I wanted to be the president of Holiday Inn by the time I was 30. And so my sweet wife was following me around all over the country. And I was working 95 hours a week. I remember in 1972, I had 1 day off. And on that day off, I mowed the property with this big tractor. So she's stuck around me now for 51 years. It's still a mystery. I don't know why, but at any rate, she's amazing and has supported me all along the way. So Holiday Inns actually hired me away from Weingartner Hammond's operations. And at the ripe old age of 26, I was responsible for all the operational input into design and planning worldwide.
Wow.
So, and that was for renovations as well as construction. So I was responsible for all of that. Well, my second day on the job, I was used to working 6-7 days a week, many hours every day. And so I was given an assignment to look at these plans for Lubbock, Texas. And so I took those plans, and back in those days, we didn't have CAD yet. And so it was all sepia drawings and all that. So I stayed there, not all night, but till real late. And well, people were leaving at 5 o'clock, and I'm going, where's everybody going? Well, this is a corporate environment. And so everybody was packing cheeks at 5 o'clock. So on my first day, I was there till about 11 o'clock that night, coming up with all these changes on these plans. So on my second day, I'm meeting with the senior vice president the senior vice president in charge of construction worldwide for Holiday Inns. And so I spread all these plans out. And I said, here are all the changes that I recommend. Here's why works better operationally, because the architects in many cases would do things that were beautiful but didn't work, operationally. So I said, here are the changes that I would make. And I went through this whole thing, all these different sheets. And he sat there very patiently and was very polite and all that. And I said, well, what do you think? He said, well, it's really interesting. I said, yeah, I mean, it'll work so much better for all these reasons. And it will save, I'm estimating, about $500,000 on this property. Now, this is 1975 when $500,000 was really $500,000, right? And I said, so what do you think? And he goes, I think you did great work. And I said, so we're going to go ahead and make these changes. And he goes, well, we're kind of too far down the line really to make any changes. But I really appreciate the work you put in. And I said, so let me get this straight, because having been in the field, I would be out there trying to save a nickel here, a dollar there, run the highest occupancy possible, all that kind of stuff. And here's a guy telling me that he's willing to throw away $500,000 when he agrees that we could save it, right? So I said, hold on just a minute. I rolled up my plans and I said, thank you for your time. And I said, you have got to be the stupidest son of a bitch I have ever met in my life. And he was like taken back, like shocked that this guy on the second day would call him a stupid son of a bitch. Right. So at any rate, I went home that night and I told my wife, who I'd promised we were not going to move anymore. She's in law school.
What gave you the courage to call him that?
Well, I always tell it like it is. It doesn't bother me to say exactly what's on my mind. And if somebody's going to throw away $500,000, that's pretty stupid. So at any rate, I went back to the office, and my senior vice president is waiting for me. And he says, I just talked to, this gentleman. And he said, what in the hell were you doing? And I said, I was telling him that I thought he was the stupidest son of a bitch I'd ever met, because he's throwing away $500,000 and he knows he's throwing away $500,000. He's still going to do it. And he said, you cannot do that. And I said, well, you hired me to do just that. And so I looked down the hallway and all these people are peering out, from the, from their offices, wondering what in the heck is going on. So at any rate, I go home that night and, my sweet wife is there. She's in law school and pregnant with our first child. And I went home and I said, sweetie, I got to tell you, my goal is to be the president of Holiday Inns by the time that I'm 30 years old. I said, I don't think I can work with people that are only 8 to 5 or 9 to 5ers who I don't think I respect. And so I said, I'm going to start looking for an entrepreneurial opportunity. And so I started going to restaurants, and I went by a Wendy's on Mount Moriah in Memphis, Tennessee. And I was just amazed. There were cars out to the street. They had all kinds of police there and everything else directing traffic. And so I sat in the restaurant and I timed how long it took to fulfill each order and what I thought the average, price was for each of those orders. And I went, man, I think I can make this baby hum, So I went to the people that owned it and I said, here's who I am. Here are my credentials. Here's what I've done. And I want to be a partner. And they were as shocked as as the gentleman that I called the stupid SOB. And but they said, you know what? You got some brass, I'll say. We have all the partners we want, but would you come and run the company? And I said, no, I'm looking for a ownership opportunity. And so about 3 weeks later, they introduced me to Jerry Hamra. And Jerry and I just hit it off immediately. And we literally, between Memphis and Little Rock, struck a deal for me to run all the operations and all that. So at the time, we had one restaurant that was under construction on Camp Robinson Road, 4600 Camp Robinson Road in North Little Rock. And I'll never forget, I was on this about December the 10th, I was hiring the last of the staff, and I had a trash can with a fire in it, and I'd turned boxes of tile, stacked boxes of tile around that to interview people because the heat wasn't working in the building yet. But we hired a great staff, and it was successful. We ended up doing 25 Wendy's. Had 2 Sisters Chicken and Biscuits, and we worked hard at it, and we ended up winning the Founders Award the first time they ever gave it, which at the time there were 2,500. When we got in it, there were less than 150, and at this time there were 2,500 worldwide, and so we won the Founders Award for being the best in the world.
Yeah, you were. And I also think that you opened the 1,000 Wendy's in Northwest Arkansas with Helen Walton.
Well, we opened Wendy's, but we didn't not that's not exactly right.
Okay.
But I wish I could take credit for opening 1,000 Wendy's. I probably would be here. I would have bought an island by now rather than being here tonight. But we did do some projects in Northwest Arkansas, and then we also down in Corpus Christi, Texas. So it was a good ride, and he was a great partner. We did a lot of good things together, but there was a point at which I thought I wanted to pursue something else. And so I went to him and told him that. And I said, I can stay for a day, or I can stay for 6 months, or I can stay for a year to make sure there's a smooth transition. But here's what I want to do. So I ended up becoming the chairman of another company in Florida that was in the double drive-through business. And we merged that with Rally's. And I actually sold the company twice on the same day to 2 different publicly traded companies because I refused to sign the non-compete or non-disclosure thing. I like the other guys better. I like the Rally's guys better. But at any rate, just from there,
what was the decision? What were you thinking when you said to Mr. Hamra, I think I'm done here and I'm going to Florida?
I knew what it was going to cost me.
Mm.
And it was a lot of money because of some of the agreements that we had that were funded by life insurance policies and all that. And I knew that was the case, but it's kind of the same thing of, having the brass, if you will, to tell somebody they're kind of a stupid SOB, is to just say, I have some ideas that I want to do. And so that's what I did. But, I still had tremendous respect for him until the day that he died, and we had a good friendship, but I moved on to other things, and then, started a hotel company, and we sold that to a publicly traded company, Guest House International, sold that to Suburban Lodges out of Atlanta. And then a company I'd helped start that acquired Barnhill's Buffets. Everything was going great until it wasn't. And so they asked me to get involved in that and to be the president and CEO of that. And so I'll never forget, the first year, I made 224 store visits in 8 states. And these people were like, you're the Energizer Bunny, because I was showing up at night when they hadn't seen anybody in management, and I was there in the morning. And it was kind of funny. I was the original undercover boss because, I wanted these people to not know who I was. And so I posed as a management trainee. And so for 3 months in Orlando and then in Jonesboro, they just thought I was a management trainee. And so I'll never forget this one gal who was in the salad department. I had worked my tail off that day. I went in there and at about 7 o'clock, and at about 7 o'clock that night, I had like gone to the bathroom and had a drink of water or two, and that was about it. I'd worked my tail off. And I went to her and I said, well, how did I do today? And she said, well, I would rather have some help than no help. and I, which really, it's really funny, because that was her way of telling me I did a great job, And so when I told the staff, I got the staff together and before I left, and I said, my name is Jim Keet, but I'm not a manager trainee. And I had these big cakes made for the morning and night staff. We had about 150 employees at that restaurant. It was a high volume restaurant. And on it said, thank you for all your efforts in training me, Jim Keet. Oh, and I had her come up and read this, the salad lady. Jim, thank you for helping train me, Jim Keet, president. And the head CEO, she goes, oh Lord, it was really funny moment, but at any rate, they knew, right there that I was one of the people that really got in there and worked. It wasn't, just a title. It was my commitment.
Right.
So let me just show you one thing.
Okay.
So I brought with me this prop, and this is above my door. You saw it earlier. So Missy, as y'all know, was with Hank Kelly and that group, and does a magnificent job, by the way. But that was given to me by Louis Petit. He found that he's notorious for going into antique shops and junk shops and all that. And he found that and gave it to me, because he calls me the big dreamer. And then I pointed out to him that that's made up of license plates. Mm-hmm. And I said, Terry, do you realize, Louis, that those are all European license plates? Oh. And he goes, oh my gosh, I did not realize it. And so, so anyway, those are actually made, ironically, from those license plates over there. But which brings me to kind of a funny story about how Jerry and I, how Louis and I got involved together. We had been friends for years, and the joke was that I would work 95 hours a week so that my partner, Jerry, in the Wendy's business, could come to Jacques and Suzanne's 4 times a week. So we, for those of you who don't know what Jacques and Suzanne's is, it was a, kind of a famous 4-star restaurant on the top of the commercial bank building at the time. But anyway, we've laughed about that for years. So I have a place down in Destin, and I invited him over for a glass of wine one night at 6:30. So he shows up with a bottle of Corton Charlemagne, which is this beautiful white Burgundy. And so the bottom line is 4.5 bottles of wine later, at about midnight, I said, something, Louis, with your reputation in fine dining, and we have a good reputation with Taziki's and kind of the other stuff that we've done, and we know a lot of people, we should do a restaurant called Petit and Keet. And he goes, what, Jim? That's a very good idea. And so that was kind of the beginning, of Petit and Keet. And at the time, I was the president and CEO of Taziki's corporate, and building restaurants across the country and that kind of thing, along with my sons. Which, by the way, and John, this is the biggest privilege in my life. Of all the things that I've been fortunate enough to do, is getting to work with my boys. Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go a step back for a minute.
Sure.
And rewind, because you went all the way to Petit and Keet really
Sure.
quick. So you were in Florida,
Mm-hmm.
And you were working for some of the companies that you were talking about. So, from Florida back to Arkansas,
Right.
How did that happen?
Well, so Barn Hills, we had 2,800 employees in 8 states.
And Barn Hill is
Barn Hills Country Buffets.
Okay.
And so, we were the company had been doing great, and all of a sudden it wasn't. And that's why I was asked to go ahead and take over the operations. But once we sold that company, I was actually working with Stevens Capital, working with them and with GE Capital, I should say, to buy the other investors out. And we were approached by a company that was backed by Jefferies Capital Partners and Wells Fargo, and to acquire us. And so very quickly, I took my acquisition hat off and put on my sales cap. And I knew what my shareholders wanted, because that's what I was going to be paying them. But I also had a fiduciary responsibility to them to really, go after this offer. So they had agreed to take $2 a share, and I was able to get $3.93 a share. They were very happy, to do that. So after that, I was playing a little bit more golf and working out and having a good time. And my sons approached me and said, we would like to go into business with you.
How old were they then?
Let's see, Tommy at the time would have been about 33. He's a lawyer, and he was working for Windstream at the time, but he really wanted to get out of HR law and be more entrepreneurial. My youngest son, Jake, was just graduating from Florida State. And so I said, all right, well, let's think about it. We started looking at different opportunities, and a friend of mine that I had done a number of business deals with said, I just bought 2/3 of this little company in Birmingham called Taziki's Mediterranean Café. You ought to come take a look at it and come help us develop it. So at the time, it was just a license. And it wasn't even a well-written license agreement. But we flew over there. I'm a pilot, and I love to fly. And so we fly over there. We have a meeting with them and have a handshake deal in one day. And so we were building restaurants, starting to build the restaurants, and all of a sudden, I kind of get recruited to run for governor, and just got the absolute snot beat out of me by my friend Mike Beebe, that I had served in the Senate with. And I don't know how I lost that race. He had a 72% approval rating, which was the highest of any governor in the country. At the time, he had $5 million in the bank, and he was a personal friend. I don't know how I could have lost that race, but he just absolutely thrashed me. It was very humiliating, but I don't regret doing it, because we started talking about some things that I thought needed to be talked about in the state of Arkansas, and how to restructure our taxation, as an example, to be more competitive with other states, not just in our area, but across the country, and just a whole bunch of other things. And we had worked on some things when I was in the House and the Senate together that might surprise some of y'all. That as a Republican, just as a side note, I was only the 8th Republican since Reconstruction to be elected to the House, and the 5th Republican since Reconstruction to be elected to the Senate. But back then, because we were not really much of a threat, I was able to get 82% of my bills passed, because if they made sense, it didn't matter. There isn't all this very vitriolic, terrible atmosphere in today's politics. It was much more cooperative and that kind of thing. He gave me a really hard time. I had to go back to the Senate Judiciary Committee 12 times to get one bill passed. And that was the strongest. Actually, it was 2 strikes and you're out bill in the country. But, I authored, I don't want to talk too much about politics, but I was the deciding vote on the landmark desegregation case. And I stayed up all night. I was in Taipei. And I stayed up all night with Bill Clinton. He was during the day for him, night for me, with Bill Clinton and Betsy Wright, working on how to get that passed. And I was the deciding vote. So that was kind of a cool thing. I authored all the literacy legislation and was on the first literacy commission. Wrote the Martin Luther King Commission legislation. At any rate, did a lot of that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So back to Taziki.
Yes.
So what's Taziki's?
I'll just go off on a tangent. This is probably what happened in that guy's office that day when I called him a stupid son of a bitch. He was probably thinking the same thing. Get out of my office, boy. At any rate.
So Taziki's was just an idea, right?
Mhm.
So
At the time, yeah.
At that time. And now you're back to Little Rock with the boys.
Mhm.
So go through that process with us.
With a slight distraction of running for governor, which in 9 months, I took 6 days off in 9 months and got thrashed. So we were starting to build more Tazikis here in Arkansas, and they recruited me to go ahead and come to Birmingham and just run the whole company. So I told them I would do that for no less than 3 or no more than 5 years, and I did it for 4. And so at the time, there were 19 restaurants, some of which were ours. And there was no franchise agreement or anything. It was just very, in its embryonic stages, very entrepreneurial. So I think I built 48 restaurants, 48 or 50 restaurants, something like that, and had another 18 under development during that time, and then came back here to work with the boys. And so now we have 11 Tazikis in Arkansas and Oklahoma. We have Cypress Social, Petit and Keet. We have 2 Waldo's Chicken and Beer, one in Tulsa and one in North Little Rock. We are partners with Kelly, Level, and Walt Todd in Count Porcula. So we bought a little shopping center and put one in North Little Rock on Maumelle Boulevard. We have one under construction on Keithley that we hope to open in about 6 weeks or so. And then we have an arrangement through Breckenridge. We put a group together, and I put all the financing together to buy Breckenridge Village. And so that's how Missy and I know each other anyhow a little bit, but now we really know. We were in a meeting this morning, in fact, together. And so we have some really exciting plans for that. And the credit really on that goes to my oldest son, Tommy, who has a lot of great relationships with some entrepreneurial restaurateurs his age, who are a few years younger than I am. And so he's kind of brought them to the table, and he's leading the charge on kind of a complete renovation and reconceptualizing of Breckenridge. And so we're very excited about that.
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about, the plans for Breckenridge, and everybody knows what Breckenridge Village is, right?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, when it was first constructed, and I bought a new shirt just for you, Mimi, and then I popped the button off, and that shirt lasted for a few hours. I've been busy today, but whoops, clumsy too. We saw an opportunity there. I've had a long-standing relationship with Hank Kelly, who I think is the smartest guy in the commercial real estate arena here in Arkansas. And so he and Michael Bodner, the same guy that I was telling you about on the Taziki's front, got together and started talking about different things that might happen in Nashville and elsewhere. And Breckenridge Village came up. And so we've put together a great partnership that has Hank remaining in it. Bought the previous other owners out. Hank stayed in it. Bo Briggs, the Bodner Group, and the Keet family own essentially all of it. And then I was able to put 2 of the banks, so we do a lot of business to get together with. And so they did the financing for us on very favorable terms for us. And so the vision is to revitalize what used to be one of the best shopping centers in the entire state of Arkansas. I mean, it won all kinds of national awards, had great tenants and all that. And it had kind of this seen better days, if you will. So the idea behind it is to have it almost an entertainment district that we may actually apply for ultimately, but to bring all this new energy with all these new restaurants, with 5 new restaurants, with Waldo's Chicken and Beer, DeLuca's Pizza out of Hot Springs, Tony Villanati. We're partnering with him. We're partnering with the Mount Fuji folks to relocate and turn that into a Flyway brewery, tap room. So and just to completely do the exterior of the building, redo all the signage, the graphics, just make it look like a brand new center, and in effect it will be a brand new center.
Are there some opportunities still open for some entrepreneurs to kind of pitch their concepts with you?
There are, but Missy will tell you that we have had such an amazing response because of our plans that we have a long list kind of people who are very interested in going in there. But the answer is yes. We're still reimagining it, if you will. And so, yeah, I think there will be some spaces there.
What's
Yes, that space is already that space is already taken. Eat my catfish.
Yeah.
Actually, John Barleycorn is on the back, but anyway.
So what a journey, and what a success story. Any kind of stories that you can tell that has something to do with close to failure? That's always something that entrepreneurs are, we hear all the success stories, but there's got to be some difficult times during that process.
Well, I don't know if you are familiar with the kind of the story behind Gateway Shopping Center. Tommy Hodges, friend of mine for many years, gosh, it's been now 30 years ago now, came to me. He was coming back from Dallas, and he had some trouble because of the FDI changes in their procedures had kind of precipitated a problem with financing. Make a long story short, he came back and said, I'd like to try to buy back Otter Creek, from the FDIC. And so I said, that's really interesting. Let me put a couple other guys together. So I was kind of the lead investor. I got 2 other guys involved in it. And we went to the bank and we got the money, and we ended up doing about 450 lots. And we built, I think it was 65 or so homes and a shopping center, 2 apartment complexes, some other, a community center and all that. And Tommy was the smart guy with a civil engineering background and a master's in civil engineering, and very entrepreneurial, but a great background. And so I was more just the sounding board and helped on the financing and all that kind of stuff. And so we did a 11-acre deal in Hot Springs where there's now a Holiday Inn. There's a Wild Wings, Olive Garden, Arvest Bank, and stuff like that. And then came back here, and he had been working on trying to do a parcel that's 256 acres, which is a lot of acreage, at the corner of 430 and 30. Okay, so we were able to acquire that. And then we had a couple of things cooking that I can't even talk about because of NDAs, but that would have really made it flourish more quickly, right? Well, those didn't happen. And we were spending millions of dollars on infrastructure and all that. And so, we finally got the first gas station to come in out there, which was a blessing because it gave us some cash. Because at one time we both had our homes for sale because we were committed to the project and we didn't need the houses that we needed, that we lived in really. And so it was like, we'll just keep investing in this. So we like to joke about it that it was our 20-year overnight success, that we just kept believing, that we can make it. So, he passed away 2 years ago, and so I really miss him. But because of his vision and connections and hard work and discipline and all that, we were able to get Bass Pro Shop here, and we built a little strip center ourselves and ultimately sold it. And ironically, we're going to be putting a Waldo's Chicken and Beer back in there where David's Burgers moved across the street. We're going to have a Waldo's in that. It's funny how things, go around, just like you guys going to the restaurant in Birmingham, that I own in Birmingham. Didn't know that we owned it until you went there and had a good experience, which was great. Any rate, there were times that, we're saying, okay, we need to go ahead and get some outside investors and, make this thing work. And we're very fortuitous that it worked. So now we have I could talk you through some of the stories of approvals from the highway department, that we worked on. Tommy did literally for 2 years. And then all of a sudden the highway department comes to us with a better plan that gave us a lot of capital on what they wanted to do that helped us fund the future development. And so we spent about $10 million just on infrastructure, but end up with a 350,000 square foot outlet mall, Cavender's strip center there where Taziki's is, hotel, the movie theater and all that. And now we have 252, I think it is, actually apartments that are being constructed. So we sold off a lot of this, and then we just kept a retained interest in the project. So we're no longer driving the project. The folks at Colliers are doing a good job. Isaac Smith and his group do a nice job. And so we just own the three of us, just and Tommy's widow just own a little bit of it, so.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we're going to turn it over to the audience to ask you questions, because I know they have a bunch. But
Okay.
before we do, what advice would you give this young entrepreneurs? You got a list there.
I'm glad you asked.
Okay.
Well, first of all, I have told my boys that I have something that I call I'll clean this up, the no a-hole rule. You don't ever want to be in business with somebody that you don't get along with and you don't trust. So I talked to him about a quadrant, and there are 4 different possibilities with good partners and good businesses. Well, you only want to be in the top left quadrant. You want to have good partners and be in a good business. Because if you're in a bad business with a bad partner, you are doomed. And most of the time, even if you're in a good business but have a bad partner, you're probably not going to make it. Or you can be in a bad business with a good partner and you're probably not going to make it. So you want to try to always think about having a good partner that you trust and you like. You will find that your bad times are not nearly as low and your highs are higher. So that's one thing. The second thing is, no matter what anybody tells you, there's no substitute for hard work. And this is something that I talk about with my sons all the time, because start thinking about bandwidth and how many places you can be at once and those kind of things. But just because you've been successful doesn't mean you're going to continue to be successful. And I tell them that the best fertilizer is an owner's shadow. You need to always be paying attention, and you need to be there. That in the restaurant business, like you folks are in now and stuff like that, there's no substitute for being there. You have to be passionate about what you're doing to be the best, not just to do okay. But if you're not committed to being the best, ultimately you're going to fail, especially in the restaurant business. The mortality rate just in the first year is over 50% in year one. in the restaurant business. So if you don't really have your ducks in a row and you're not willing to make that commitment to excellent, to be the best in class, you just shouldn't do it. And that's true of any business, but especially one that has a lot of turnover like the restaurant business. You should always lead by example. You know, one of the things that I pride myself in is that I am probably the best mopper in our company now. You know, I can go into a store and I always go up to a dishwasher who might have just started that day. And I'll say, let me ask you something. What do you think the most important job in the restaurant business is? And they'll go, well, I don't know. I guess you, boss, or, you know, it's the general manager or whatever. And I'll go, no, it's you. Because if the food is great and the hospitality is great and everything else is perfect and the ambience and everything else, and they get a dirty fork or a dirty plate, they probably are not going to come back.
Yeah.
So if you're constantly building up the people that you are working with, so they buy into your vision and they see you being willing to do anything in the restaurant or in whatever business it is, you know, people, we buy a shopping center. People see me out picking up the parking lot. You know, just, you know, you want to always be never putting yourself above the task that you expect them to do with excellence, right? So I have an acronym, PRIDE, that's professionalism, responsibility, integrity, dependability, and excellence, being trying to be the best. And I could go on and on. Shall I? That's probably enough. Yeah, those are just some of the, you know, some of the things that I think are important. Yeah.
He wants you to repeat what PRIDE.
Okay. Yeah. It's professionalism, responsibility, integrity, dependability, and striving for excellence.
That's awesome. So I know there are some questions, so I'm going to pass the mic over.
I mean, I have a lot of questions, but I'll hold it to one. Just you've had a lot of experience, apparently, as you described it, with the operations of the restaurant business. What is it that you do to make one successful or efficient where they aren't before? I mean, what do you see that, and particularly for people who are in that business, what is it they need to be paying attention to, and how can they make one that isn't doing well do well? What are the keys to that?
Well, you know, first of all, if you don't have a great staff, you're not going to succeed. And I have another saying, and that is that A's attract A's, B's attract C's, C's attract F's. So don't ever hire a C, you know, because if you don't have a great staff, you're not going to do well. And we are so blessed. We have about 550 employees right now. Our retention rate is so much better than the other people in the restaurant industry because we treat people with respect. We try to reward them. We give them a good career path where they can see where they can actually go. We have 4 general managers that make Taziki's and all of them. Yeah, just in general. But in Taziki specifically, we have 4 of our 8 stores in Arkansas. The people who are the general managers making good salaries started out as grill men. And so we've given them a career path, you know, to go to the top. And one of those is actually an area director now. So, you know, we believe in our people. We invest in them. They know that there isn't any task that they might be asked to do that we won't do ourselves. And in fact, I was so proud of my oldest son and my youngest son. Tommy was at the opening of the Waldo's, and we had a dishwasher not show up. And so he was back there with a trash bag that he had made into, you know, cut holes in the top and both arms, you know, and doing dishes. You know, Jake did the same thing at Count Porcula, at the opening of Count Porcula out in North Little Rock. So I hope that answered the question. I would kind of roundabout. One part of it where we're kind of unique is that since 1979, I've believed in systems. And if you don't have the right technology that you're basing your staffing and other things on, you're behind the ball game. So we have really great tools that we call them in the restaurant to help us control our labor, control our food costs, know what our product mix is, all those kind of things through programs that were very innovative when we first were involved in it, that you can get off the shelf now, not necessarily that are available to really help you run your restaurant efficiently.
Questions? Sorry.
Wait.
Just a second.
What advice would you have for somebody wanting to get into the restaurant business that has no experience?
Don't. Well, I'll just say this. There are a lot of people who might be accountants or lawyers or doctors or whatever that, said, I've always aspired to be in the restaurant business. And you know how to become a millionaire in the restaurant business if you're a physician or a lawyer or an accountant? Start with 10 million. Start with 10 million. That's how you become a millionaire, is to start with 10 million. The point being that if you're really serious about getting in the business and you've never done it before, I would recommend that you go to a friend that is in the business and actually work there for a time, even if it's only in a kind of a as an intern or whatever, but really make sure, first of all, you want to do it, because it ain't all it's cracked up to be. There are a lot of long hours. It isn't easy to make money, especially in this environment right now with commodity costs so high and the labor costs have gone higher, much higher. It's very challenging. So I would test it out by going to a friend. Come to me, I'll put you to work this afternoon. In fact, I'm going to Cypress Social when I leave here. If you want to come do some dishes, follow me on over there, but really understand every aspect of it. Make sure it's what you want to do before you get into it. I'll tell you this, this may sound trivial, but just going back to my Wendy's days, the best example I can give you about being passionate about what you do is that I was just as passionate about putting a perfect, if I was working the grill, putting a perfect single cheese on a bun and seeing a guest really get excited about a great cheeseburger as I am a Chateaubriand now. If you don't have pride on the incremental small things and really want to be the best at whatever that is, you just shouldn't do it. Find something else to do that you can really be passionate about. There's an old saying that says, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And so, this business is something that, I've just kind of grown up in. I've been in it for a while now, and done 160 something restaurants. Still learning, still trying to be the best.
Hey, Jim, what's your decision-making process whenever you've got a full plate or you think that you're pretty full, and then another project comes along your doorstep that looks pretty appetizing? What's that decision-making process look like?
It's a great question, and we're kind of going through that right now. The more visibility you have, the more opportunities come along. And I think the first thing you have to do is be really introspective and to analyze what your bandwidth is. The biggest mistake that people make in the restaurant business in particular, but I think this is across the board, is probably relevant and true, is that you exceed your ability to either finance it, you run out of financial resources, or you don't have the operational talent to do it. Well, that kind of is true of an individual as well. There's only so much you can do. So many, the old thing about how many balls can you juggle before you start dropping them. So you just need to be really careful. And if you're already involved in an enterprise and you see an attractive opportunity, you have to look at it and say, can I balance it and do both with excellence? If the answer to that is no, it's an easy decision that you don't do it. Or you say, how can I spread the workload without missing a step by trusting other people? And that's what we have been so fortunate in, is that we have, as an example, our operating partner at Cypress Social, he and his wife really helped start Petit and Keet. A lot of the original, I helped on all of the hiring of all the initial people, but, we spent months training before we opened Petit and Keet. We spent months training before we opened Cypress Social. And, people that were crazy because, we've opened 5 restaurants in COVID, and I'm not talking about cookie cutter, McDonald's, where you're pretty much guaranteed to be successful. I'm talking about, my kids love to, well, they hate to hear me say, I've got a cool idea. They know that that's going to cost between $1,000 and $1 million. So they were kidding me about Cypress Social because it's a really cool idea. We're only a couple of $1 million over budget on that one. And my wife was saying, oh my God, I hope this isn't Keats Folly, And so now every time I, get our sales figures, I get every sales figure for the restaurants every night. And so I'll say, gosh, it was really tough. We only did 525 people tonight at Keats Folly. It's kind of rubbing it in a little bit, but anyhow.
Okay, so one more question. I'm hoping that Jim will stay a little bit. I know some of you want to talk to him personally, but one more question.
Is there anything going on with the workforce today? Yeah. Is there anything about the workforce today that's different from when you were working before? And what do you have to do to accommodate that? Now, in other business stuff, and I have no experience in the restaurant business, but in other ones, there's a lot of conversation about millennials and Gen Zs and what it takes to motivate them. And, that's kind of the basic part of it. But are there things that you see that are different today, and how have you taken that into account?
The answer is yes. When I first started, and this was back in the Stone Age, but when you go rewind the tape, literally 50 years, if you're going to be in the restaurant business or the hotel business, if you weren't willing to work 7 days a week, you probably weren't going to succeed. I mean, I literally, for the first 15 years that we were married, I averaged about 95 hours a week. And so today, you don't, at the management level, you don't find that many people that are willing to make that kind of commitment. It's just, it doesn't matter what age group they're in, that they're just not willing to make that commitment. So, I've had to temper my expectations over the years, and I've never really expected anybody to work as hard as I have. I'm one of my goals. I'm very good about setting my goals, and every year I work for about 2 months getting everything ready, and then every year on New Year's Day I do my final draft, for my goals and all my personal goals, my businesses, all that stuff. And one of my goals for this year was to get my work week down to 40 hours a week. Failed.
Oh, no.
So some people are saying, gosh, I'm just exhausted from working 40 hours a week, and I'm going, I'm just trying to get my work week down to 40 hours a week, so yeah, there's a big difference. And I think part of it is, the Gen Z and all that stuff, the millennials perhaps, but I think there's a different mindset in a way. And so what we've tried to do is to temper our expectations of how many hours people really want to work and are willing to work and that kind of thing, so that we, our managers have a 5-day work week, which in the restaurant business used to be unheard of, or in the hotel business. So occasionally they'll have to work 6 days on a vacation or whatever, but and also about 52 hours a week, which is a lot more than some people are willing to work, but it's a heck of a lot less than some people expect these days. So we try to strike a good balance where people are still very motivated and happy and still have a family life and that kind of thing.
Well, thank you, Jim. Thank you for the stories. Thank you for the inspiration. Thank you for advice. Big hand for Jim, please, today.
Thank you.
And thank you guys for being here. I want to thank our sponsor, Simmons Bank, Foss Accounting Firm, and Wright, Lindsay and Jennings. And hopefully we'll see you again, hopefully in the next couple of days or weeks when we have another event here at the Venture Center. Thank you.